We will be voting on accepting a donation of personal trainer treadmill. No cracks about my weight, please, as I talk about this. Valued at $100. It's 10 years old, but it is in good condition, and the treadmill will be used at the junior high school.
Are you doing the donating? Is that what you do?
That's very personal.
I'm just asking.
I won't ask any questions, but I know it's just like this.
That's it. Now I have to get my composure.
You look distraught, Joe.
I'm going to the next subject. So we will be getting a free treadmill. We will be discussing the funding of a new position, the school resource officer, to be placed in the district under terms set forth in a memorandum of understanding with Exeter Township Board of Supervisors that is agreeable to both parties.
Well, I'd like to say a few things about that. I've done a lot of research on this issue since it was brought up to us. And I would suggest that all board members Google research officers research, resource officers, the research on resource officers. And you will find that there are two opinions on this. One from the advocates for children who are against this resource officers in the schools because they see it as a pipeline from school to prison. And also they see it as the children who are getting involved in these things are getting involved for disciplinary reasons and also for zero tolerance. And when you have zero tolerance, then the officers' hands are tied and they have absolutely no leeway as far as maybe reporting these, and then they get involved in the juvenile system. But then you also have people that like I guess he's the CEO of the National Rifle Association. When Sandy Hook occurred, his response was that there should be a resource officer in every school building in the United States. And as an educator, I mean, I cannot support this type of idea that what we need is more guns to combat the people that have guns. So I hope that you would look at the scholarly articles on resource officers, the research there. There was an article in USA Today concerning our school resource officers part of the school to prison pipeline and the nature of crime by resource officers, and the saga continues. So that's just a few of them. So I would hope that we would think of this in a very, and the research also is that it's mixed ideas that resource officers can deter anyone that wants to go in and do a mass killing like it was at Sandy Hook. So please do your research.
Mrs. O'Brien, Keisha, I believe that you're only quoting the research that supports your position. I've done a lot of research. Mr. Kramer has done some research. I want to speak for you. We have printed out some articles that give the true picture of it. I don't consider something published in USA Today to be a scholarly.
I have to agree with the doctor, because anyone who brings up the NRA in a discussion of school violence is obviously trying to slant it in the opposite direction. That is not, the NRA is not scholarly, and there's a lot of information on the internet that supports this not only for prevention of crime, but also for psychological development of the child, or development of the child. There was an extremely slanted view, but that's your right as a member to bring that slanted view. Mr. Zapini, you wanted to talk?
I'm going to support this one. I think we've seen unbelievable change, and a lot of things have happened through the years in our schools. I mean, when my kids started, we didn't have locks and security to get into the front door either. We didn't have buses and audio in the school buses. We didn't have a lot of things that we have right now. I think it's ironic that I know that we're talking about what's going on at Penn State, and they just added tasers in addition to what they've already had. The bottom line is we need to protect not only our students but our teachers as well. I believe one of the numbers was there was on average 300,000 teacher attacks a year. The students. So there's a lot of information out there, but we're in a changing environment, and I don't think it's something where we need to look in. Is there 7 schools that are doing this in the district? I think what we need to do is we need to concern ourselves with our school. And we have gentlemen in the high school that was working in somewhat of a capacity, but not in a position that as a true officer was able to protect the district, the students and the teachers. So I am going to support it. I know it's a subject that is very emotional for a lot of people, but I would much rather have someone there that is able to protect everyone in the building.
I've been having, just a quick question, I've been having some issues with my electronic equipment and my internet service. Have we received a final copy of the MOU concerning this?
No, we don't have an MOU, a draft or anything. We need to get the approval of both boards before we would. We've put a lot of work and effort into this already. I don't want to go any further until I have assurance that I have support from both boards. And the only board that I can worry about is our board. I'll have to have the chief worry about his board. So at that point, we'll develop an MOU, and we have some sample MOUs that I've read. And it's a pretty standard boilerplate template kind of thing, spelling out the salary, the benefits, the hours, the work conditions, the job responsibilities, which I think the board has seen drafts of that. And we'll arrive at something that's mutually agreeable to the township, the police department, and to the school district and the school board, and at the appropriate time. We've already spent a lot of time applying for a grant, talking about this, bringing people in to talk to the board about this topic. And at this point, I just, am ready to pursue an up or down vote from our board, and then leave it up to the chief to do the same with his board.
Well, one of my concerns obviously is, and this is, this is my own baggage, and I'll admit that, but I'll tell you why. I don't think we have a great track record dealing with the township, and my concern is what the conditions of the MOU will be, because if this thing is not really, if it's all going to be on us, or if it's going to be 60-40 on us, if we're not going to be in this together, then I can't support it.
Well, first of all, the MOU, what the board would be voting on is, just to form that position, and then you'd have to vote on the MOU, and if the MOU was something that the board didn't support, it wouldn't go any further regardless of your vote on this. So it's only under the conditions that there would be an agreeable MOU between the two entities. I don't really foresee that as a problem at all. Like I said, there's a standard MOU that we would use as a draft, and sure, their board can make changes that they want, but then we could either accept or reject those changes. And this is only a vote that we want to do this if we get an MOU that everybody can live with.
Will we see a job description of this position before we vote to approve its existence?
Of course.
I honestly think that we ought to be involved in developing that job.
I think so too, and one of my concerns, I've done some research too, And probably the largest, and I think the most significant criticism of all of this is that there is no requirement by law for these people to be trained to
Yes, there
deal
is.
with children.
Yes, there is.
Well, we
There's
just
a
need to make sure the
requirement.
training is important.
It's written into the grant, and it's a requirement in Pennsylvania for a person to be a school resource officer. They must receive training, and it's outlined, there's only certain associations that offer the training that is approved by the state of Pennsylvania. And in order to get any funding or support from the state, we need to make sure that the training is in place and it's written into the grant. And the training that I wrote in is the training that was advocated by the gentleman, Officer J, or Sergeant James, I guess it is now, from Pottsgrove, who came in last week at our security meeting to talk about his experiences as a school resource officer in Pottsgrove. That's the best training that's out there. It's the most intensive, and he spoke highly of his experience with it. And that's the training that our SRO would be required. And the chief and I had already agreed on that training is going to be critical.
I would like to see it in the job description, and I would like to see it as a minimum requirement for the person we hire.
We'll work to get a draft of the job description and the MOU if the board wants to pursue this further. Like I said, at this point, we've committed too much time and effort into it to take it any further until I have any assurance that our board is in support of this.
I'd just like to address one of Pat's issues. You know, Pat, we had 230 calls to the school district over the last year, and there were 50 arrests. I'll actually contend to you that having a school resource and the officer will probably reduce the number of kids that end up in the prison system. But, you know, I've talked about this for a while. I've also done a lot of research. I've talked about this as being an issue of risk management, and it really is. I mean, Pat talks about mass shootings. Mass shootings do occur, but that's not really what this is about. If a man or a person wants to show up with an AR-15 and shoot their way into a school, I don't care if you have 10 police officers there. All they have is a 9mm or a 40 caliber weapon. They're not going to be able to defend themselves. So we have been lucky, and I've talked about luck as one element of safety and security. It just is. We have been fortunate enough to not have had somebody show up and want to shoot up our schools. That being said, when you look at those instances where that has happened, there is always something on a look back that tells you that this was going to occur, but people don't notice it at the time. And what the district and the administration has done to us is they've come and they have said to us, we have reached our maximum ability to be able to provide the level of safety we'd like to have in our schools, both for our children and for our teachers, and we need now to go to another level. Okay, that level has been a school resource officer. As we learned from the school resource officer last week from Pottsgrove School District, within a period of 4 years, he dropped by 89% the police-involved incidences in the school district. So that would take our incidences from 230 a year to under 30. Okay, so that's making a difference. And if you look at I don't know if everybody had the opportunity to see his handout, but he had bulleted all the things he did, including his certification by NASRO, the National Association of School Resource Officers. As Russ points out, rightfully so, the memorandum of understanding is critical because you do not want to criminalize teenage behavior, okay? You know, as I said to people, if my teenage behavior was criminalized, I'd still be sitting in Gradeford, okay? You know, we all did stupid things. There's testosterone flowing, there's fighting in the hallways, there's all that kind of stuff that occurs. That's just part of being a teenager, okay? So we need to be careful about that. And I think the MOU spells that out. I think our building leadership also uses discretion in working with police officers when they are called onto the campus. I can tell you, as somebody who has a responsibility in a large public company for overseeing security, that you need to have subject matter expert, you need to have a leadership who is overseeing that and accountable for that. You need to have somebody who's in charge on a day-to-day basis. You need to have policies, you need to have procedures, and you need to have somebody who is actually in charge and has the qualifications and the expertise. And I use this as an example because I used it last week. A lot of the situations that do occur in the district are not the mass shootings, although they get a lot of the publicity. It's often something that emanates that happened out in the community, or could be related to something as common as a protection from abuse order. Right now, any number of people in our district may be under the jurisdiction of a protection from abuse order. And that protection from abuse order spells out very specifically what can and cannot happen to the parties covered under that order. We may have a teacher in the district right now, because we don't have a reporting mechanism that requires them to come into a building and tell the building leader that they're covered by a protection from abuse order. We don't have a policy or procedure or somebody managing that process. So Mary comes in, she's gotten her protection from abuse order. Bill shows up with her lunch, okay, because Bill is coming after Mary, but the person who's working the locks at the front door says, oh, it's Bill. That's Mary's husband. Has no idea that Mary's under a protection from abuse order. So the buttons click, Bill is in the building, and now you have chaos. Okay, that's one thing that a school resource officer would be able to put in place to be able to, again, manage your risks. And I think that's all that we're trying to do here, is to find a way to manage risk.
Are there any other comments?
I think one of the things that impressed me listening to Sergeant James last week was the amount of information that the SRO could bring from the community, because they were knowledgeable about the community, and they actually could bring it into the school to use in terms of taking care of issues in the school, which we're not allowed to do now, because that barrier is not there. There is a barrier there between public and the school without this person. So I was impressed by, I mean, you make a point with the PFA, but it has to do with issues that are going on with students too. And the police department does know what's going on around in the community, actually, and the fact that they can alert us to issues then that will be useful to talk to these kids in school, I think was a big advantage. The other thing is, I don't know, Mr. McFarland is here tonight, maybe he could comment on how he sees that position in the high school. And I don't want to put you on the spot necessarily. You can say, lady, shush, and I will be glad to do that. But
I recommend you do not say that.
I would not say that. The safety of my job. I'd also invite Mr. Dean to comment, but I agree that you can look in a reactive manner about some of the safety and the need for somebody to constantly be in charge of that. Our biggest frustration is that we are spread very thin many days as we're going around the building, and it's just too important to not have somebody there more permanently doing it. I would also say that the one factor in my mind is the proactive relationship building, that an SRO, the right person in the right position to do the right job, is invaluable, cannot be measured in terms of discipline, incident numbers, or arrests, because it will save innumerable numbers, if you will, and will make an immeasurable impact on our school community. It is, I cannot value that piece of it enough. So I would urge you to look at both the safety side of it in a reactive manner, and do not underestimate the impact that an SRO in this position would have across the entire district about building great relationships that will make a huge difference for our kids.
And to Jeff's point, I was an elementary principal, but even in a K-5 situation, we had Officer Keith, the DARE officer. He was coming to our school twice a week, and Officer Keith taught DARE to our 5th grade classes, and he got to know every single 5th grader. We had 4 or 5 5th grade classes. He got to know every single 5th grader and their siblings and their families, and he knew who had problems in the home that maybe the police had been called out to address, and why some kids were acting out. And he gave me a lot of great intel about what was going on in the community that may be psychologically impacting the kids in our schools. And if I needed him to to talk to a kid. We didn't have any male teachers, just our phys ed teacher, but no male classroom teachers at the time in our school. And in many cases, for those 5th grade boys especially, who were going off to the middle school and beyond, he was the only male role model that they had, and he was like a father figure to those kids. And yes, and he carried a gun with him at all times. And what he did there, obviously it was younger kids, but what he did there was not about discipline, or it was all about the kids. It was all about helping kids, forming relationships with them, and giving them what they needed at the time, the encouragement that they needed, and sometimes the tough conversations with them, but not always in a fatherly, supportive fashion, never in a police officer fashion. And that's the kind of asset we would have for our schools. And I was never afraid that there was an officer in my building carrying a firearm ever. I was always glad to have him there, and he was a big help. So,
Are you suggesting that there'll be an education component to this job description?
yes.
I was just going to comment on that, because I used to work with Officer James, who spoke here last week. And he did a lot with DARE. He did a lot with training our staff in cyberbullying, and I know we had an article, I'm just looking it up over here, about Colorado and the sexting thing that's going on, and it's not just about trying to capture, get the culprits, so to speak, but students can be educated in this, and we have to have somebody who's going to be up to date on the criminal aspects of some of these things that are going on, that students are going to get themselves in a lot of trouble by just having these cell phones with cameras and all these other types of technology. So I think the value that an officer can bring to a school district with the right person is just invaluable. It's just it could be extremely important, extremely valuable.
We have 10 building administrators, and some of them in this room, and we have teachers and counselors in this room. And not to speak for anybody else, but if you asked any of them, if they thought it would be an asset or a hindrance to our students, I believe I know what they would say.
I would also just add that the student in 5th grade that Dr. Martin would have assisted, or that the officer would have assisted, is down the road the junior or senior in the high school. So this is something that you see a benefit on the because the energy and the time has been put in at those early grade levels, building that trust, so that when they are seniors, when they're juniors, when they're sophomores, and facing some more involved or some more risky life decisions, they have another person that they can go to, another resource that they can go to. And again, the officers hearing stuff from the community that they're able to bring to bear at the high school, so that would allow us to put them in communication with our student assistance program or with our in-house progressions counselor. There's a lot of things that come out of that other than just the law enforcement component of that, which frankly may be even one of the smaller pieces. But I did say to Mr. Kane this morning, as a matter of fact, that one of the things I think that would be a real benefit to the community is the idea that it would be really great if students did not see police as an us against them type of a relationship. And sadly, that seems to be changing more and more. And it would be great if students from K all the way up through their senior year in high school, and then when they graduated, saw officers kind of by that motto of protect and serve, and as opposed to the boogeyman or the cop that's out to bust us. And that only happens with FaceTime. They were at the high school for Safe Halloween night, passing out glow sticks, and they said it was an absolutely phenomenal event for them. They loved being able to have that kind of positive interaction with the community. They asked if they could come back again next year, because they just thought it was such a positive experience without being tainted by discipline or anything else. So just a few things to add in terms of the value of having that consistent presence there that students start to trust the officer as someone to help them rather than someone who is there to, watch their every move in a skeptical sort of view.
I would take it one step further even than just that it's nice to have, it's crucial. In my research after being involved in a school shooting, it was rather unfortunate, one of the clear indicators is that one of the most important pieces of safety is not the communication from adults to students, it's actually vice versa. It's developing relationships so the communication is from a base of, in this case, 1,400 students in a district, 4,000 students. They know what's going on, and if you develop those relationships, almost universally, something can be known. It's just a matter of whether it gets reported to people that are trusted. So it's absolutely nice, it's the right thing to do, and it actually directly impacts the safety. I couldn't argue more strongly for this position. It would make a great difference for our district and our kids.
I think we need to put this in proper perspective, and if I remember this correctly, this person is going to be ours 60% of the time, is that correct?
70.
70. Oh, okay, so it's 70, all right, so
Yes.
it's going to be ours 70% of the time. I mean, I don't want to be a naysayer here, but I think we're painting an unrealistic picture about what one person 70% of their time can accomplish in all of our school buildings.
Well,
Do you have that list of what the officer accomplished down there? If
he
might
would
be
be
interesting.
here 100% of the time during the school. What they're talking about is a 70-30 split in salary, but that's because he wouldn't be here during summertime. He'd be here full-time in the district.
Yeah, I'm
During the
sorry,
school
maybe
year.
that was misleading. He's
Okay, it was, I got the
100% of
idea,
time.
I got the idea that he was going to be here 7 out of 10 days.
Oh, no. He's here every day when
Or
the school
she.
is in session. But that's, the contract for police officers is 200 and some days. We're in school 181 days.
You gave some statistics, and I'm curious about the number of times that the police were called. I would really like to,
Officer Bain gave those last week.
I would like some clarification on that, and what I would like to know is how many of those incidents were serious enough that we needed to report them to the Department of Education.
Well, there were 6 that led to arrests. So I'm not sure about the reporting, because there's only some that are reported.
Every suspension should be reported, but it's coded.
Right, but that's not reported as a violent act.
No, the coding determined what
Right. And you don't always need police intervention for suspension, obviously.
Right. I just, I guess my time on this board, that seems like a lot, and I feel like I've been in the dark, that there's a whole lot more going on there.
Well,
And obviously, we've been told.
and it's not always for criminal acts, and it's not always for student. It could be for a custody issue. It could be for, even something with a violent parent or an upset
All right,
parent.
well, the interesting thing about PFAs is they're not written for schools. I can walk in with a PFA against another student, and the PFA from the court will read I can't be within 100 yards. And then we have lunch together. It just doesn't work in the system.
Whatever the specific incidents were, for some reason, 230 sometimes, either the administrators or the staff or the faculty of our school district felt they had to call an officer of the law.
Okay?
I mean,
It doesn't
how
mean that they
many
actually have
of
to come
them,
here.
how many of them could have been handled? Well, he said in Pottstown, he went from a very similar number, which no one here believed that we were going to have.
Pottsgrove, right? Not Pottstown.
Pottsgrove.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
a huge difference, but thank you.
So he had the 236 in Pottsgrove, and he brought it down to 26 or something like that. We had such a similar number, and that came from the Exeter Police Department, from Sergeant Bain, who had, from the records, reviewed and found that we had, the Exeter police had responded to our schools 230 some times. And that means that someone
Right.
in a position of authority felt that we needed their assistance.
Bob, I do want to clarify, I mean, Pat's disputing that she says it's 230 calls, not 230 responses. You have an obligation as a police officer, if you're called to respond, even if somebody calls and tells you, oh, everything's fine, you have to show up on that call and clear it, because you can't take somebody's word that everything is
And
fine.
Sergeant Bain specifically said responses.
So you mean to tell me we have 180 days of school and police officers had to come to
Twice a
this
day.
school 223 times and then something's wrong?
Twice a
with the
day except for
administration?
holidays.
Something's
What's wrong
wrong
with
with
the
this.
administration?
Society, Pat.
No, nothing is wrong with the administration.
Can I provide some clarity?
Pardon me?
Can I provide some clarity on that?
Please do.
The statistic that Sergeant Bain reported was approximately 225 calls. So sometimes in the flow of discipline, a student may leave school. There's 35 exits. It doesn't happen often, but every other week that may happen where for a 7th and 8th period, somebody cuts class and leaves school. Now they're in the community. So we have no jurisdiction. We don't know their whereabouts. They may have a hall pass and just have left the building. So we call the police. That is a call. That would go into that. Do they come to the building? No. But we are just trying to make sure we're doing our part out of responsibility for our kids. So the statistic that we've showed was that since the beginning of the 2014-15 school year, which is a little over a year, there were 40 times where kids were basically cited or arrested. In some cases, some of these issues were out of school, so they weren't cited, which is a summary offense, which would not go into the typical juvenile system, and typically these cases are removed from their records once they provide community service. But those are the ones that we focus on as more major incidents. And we will call on those, and we will have follow-up calls. And so there's a lot of communication. So I would just like to make the distinction between the communication with the police, where we are notifying them, where we're trying to do right by our kids, where we realistically have 1,400 kids, and we're trying to do the best we darn can for each one of them. And we need to make that notification. And then there are 40, I think there were 50 that were reported to the state. So some of them may not have been in our building. That's district-wide. The majority of them were in our building. They're high school students. So that's kind of the distinction I would make. How we need to follow up with specific issues that we tackle from a discipline standpoint and work with the police, and then the communication we need to have with the police as well. That would be the distinction I would draw to kind of explain that discrepancy.
Well, I would certainly not extend any indictment of any employee of this district who felt it necessary to have a police officer and call them. That is not a failure of leadership. I don't know how it went at Reading when you were teaching, but I did not expect any of my teachers sitting in the back of the room to grab a high school sophomore that I weighed 195 pounds when I was a sophomore. I don't expect them to be wrestling down that sophomore. There's common incident. I expect them to call a professional that takes care of it. And so I would highly endorse anyone who feels the slightest inclination that they need a police officer there to call them, because none of these people are trained.
Are trained to do what?
One, we don't do restraint training in our schools.
I think don't these guidance counselors, don't they have that sometimes with
You expect them to call a guidance counselor to come down and
I'm
restrain
talking
the
about
child?
special education students. Yes.
Some of our teachers and aides go for what they call safety care training in order to be able to handle some kids with special needs. if it becomes necessary, yes.
It's, I mean, that is done in the schools. But
Some-
I,
for some.
well, I'm great, thank you for clarifying that, because I was under the impression that they were called to the school, and, you know, I have a difficult time if you're calling 223 times in a year to have the police come to the schools. But I understand what you're saying. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. McFarland.
Yeah, just one more point of clarification. We have not adopted a standard operating procedure where we're calling the police when a kid cuts a class. Or have we?
No.
Okay. Well, that's what he said. The kid who cut the class, we call them.
Well, he said let the building run. He said let the
The
building
building
run.
is concerned about the safety of the child.
At the end of the day.
I'll give you another for instance from this morning. There's a student who had a family issue. He called his mother. There was a custody situation where he was not happy with either parent. There's a lot of stuff going on. The mom came into the building. They had a family dispute that ended up with the student punching a wall, kicking the desk in our main office, cursing, walking out into the hallway. The guidance counselor followed. I was in an IEP meeting, left to follow the student. Mr. Kane was also involved, and this is just something we handled. So we are capable of handling situations, but we are pulled in many different directions, and that consistency to stay on top of it, to build those relationships with kids is something that would benefit our school and our district and our kids. So that's a situation where the police weren't involved at all. We handled it. We do that uniformly. That was just today. And last week started with the call coming into my cell phone as I'm waiting for the buses from Officer Undercuffler, just discussing stuff going on around the community. This is just what we do. And that level of, that partnership is something we value, and it would really benefit our school.
Any other comments?
I think I asked you, Dr. Martin, concerning these arrests, what was the percentage of students as far as minorities as versus Caucasians? Because that is another issue that...
I did email you the answer to that question, but there were 6 students out of those 50 students that were, the police responded to. There were 6 students who were eventually arrested. All 6 students, by the way, were found guilty of whatever crime they were suspected of eventually. And 3 of them were African American, 1 was Hispanic, and 2 were white. That was the breakdown. I forgot to look at the special education. I'll have to go back and look at Mr. Kane's chart that he sent me. So that was one thing I didn't look at. You had mentioned special education. I forgot to look at that, but that was the ethnicity breakdown.
We will be voting on approving a property tax refund in the amount of $3111.04 for Christine Fulweiler due to the VA exception. And we will be approving or voting on the budget transfers for the month in the amount of $97,050. That's it.
And with the budget transfers, does that have to do with what's going on at the state level as far as, not getting any funds?
No, those 2 projects which weren't budgeted for, one Lorraine damage to the building. No, we've received insurance proceeds, but in order, you have to have an appropriation in the line item to do a purchase order, et cetera. And then the other one, I'm trying to remember. It's the junior high, and it was the lift. The lift that had to be installed for the at the building. They were not budgeted line items, so we transferred funds. Those are the 2 major ones. So, as far as the budget impasse, with our local tax revenue, property tax revenue, we're still in good shape.
One was for 34,289 and the other one was for 24,800.
Right, 24,000 was the lift, 34 was the damage to by a paving truck backing into the Marine building.
Thank you, Mr. Strong. Is there anyone here from the personnel committee? We have, next month, we have some resignations to consider. Next week, I'm sorry. Certificated staff, special ed teacher, Ms. Hennessy. We also have appointments. Admin staff and certificated staff, as well as certificated substitutes. I'll ask you to review those. Support staff and extracurricular staff that in particular allows us to add the environment-thon and some of the special competition science fair advisors get paid this year. We do have a request for a leave of absence. Valerie Bullock, Ms. Heller. Changes of status. Support staff moving one driver classification to another, and then staff conferences with their corresponding expenses, as we review those. And that is personnel considerations as of this month.
I have some questions about the personnel. Number 3, where it said Allison Wilson, senior high school temporary reading specialist, tutor for student services required by IEP.
Is that on appointments, Pat?
No, that's under.
It's under being, it should be.
Administrative staff.
What?
Number 3.
That was the
Before
request,
some-
yeah, that was the request of Dr. Miller's relative to an IEP for a senior high school student. So if you want to,
A student at the high school who will be working with their parents and their lawyers.
I'm sorry, what?
A student at the high school who is a senior, who is someone who's been working with the district with their lawyers to look at what they feel is appropriate education for their child. We have agreed to provide the one-on-one reading tutoring for the student, rather than sending the student to a program down in Bryn that we did for one of our other students in the summer. And so that was our compromise, instead of sending the student, that we paid all that busing, we want to tuition to down in Bryn that we have a reading specialist up here for the student, and so that's what that cost us.
that's the first I've seen that happen. I know most of these.
Yeah,
it is unique. It's
Very
different.
unique.
Okay, so it was an agreement between someone that brought a concern with their lawyer. Okay, thank you. And I was also concerned about all the guest teachers that we have as compared to.
Yeah, I'm more
certificate
concerned
ones.
about filling absences.
I know.
But we keep working on it.
Thank you.
We don't, we're compared to some other districts where.
Yeah, and there's fewer and fewer people in the
Yeah.
education,
Yeah.
students in the pre-service education.
You ought to volunteer, Pat.
Well, you know what, I did volunteer here, I'm a volunteer at the Exeter School District right now, so I got my
You know,
clearance.
as a substitute,
What are you
of
doing?
course, you'd have to resign from the board because you
Yeah.
couldn't get a paycheck.
I'm not getting a paycheck, I'm gonna be a volunteer here at the school.
Sure you don't want to pay?
How are we paying for you?
I haven't got one for 4 years, like what I want one now. I could go to the regular school district
I'd feel
and pay
bad if you didn't.
$170. I could do that, $170 a day as a substitute. But I decided I would help out here at the school district. So I knew they paid me 4 teachers, principals that want me I'll help him out with reading or writing or math.
When was the last time you looked at that?
Student functions, Mrs. Cushman.
Item A, the field trips within the 60-mile radius. And I noticed that 1 and 2 are the times are passed, and I don't know if that was just because the information was after the last.
Yeah, it came in like the day after the last board meeting or something like that, that it was just missed from the last time. But these were ones that were just reporting.
Then item picture here with my item B, the senior high school kids going to New York City on May the 27th, participating in master class. That's from 2016. Oh, that's really advanced.
That's it, yeah. In honor of Dr. Bender, how many school days will it?
Yeah. And then tomorrow at 1:45 in the afternoon, we're going to be meeting with the student forum group in the LGI.
They're gonna actually get there at 1:55. Mr. Kane asked if they could go to their 8th period class, checking with their teacher and then come, so it's probably gonna be more like 1:55.
So I hope that you're going to come.
Yes, ma'am.
And,
Would you say 155? I'll be there. As long as it's a public forum. Because I love that.
and that's it. Now, well, we're going to try this to see if we can get more students, because our schedules are so busy that they just
Exactly.
can't make it. So this is our accommodation for
I'd like to talk to some of the truants.
I heard
Yeah,
Mr.
police
Kane
officer, they
excursion
round them
here
up.
Yeah. That's it.
All you gotta do is call.
You know, Carol, I heard that Bill Kane was discouraging your participation because of my encouragement that they go down and see him every day.
Is that right?
That's what
Well, we'll just have to talk about that tomorrow.
I think that's a misconception.
I heard. Dr. Martin. Thank you, Carol.
Well, I'll turn it back over to you, Bob. This item is really just a summary of what I heard as the proposed board goals, a draft of the board goals that we discussed last month. So I put that on the agenda for the board's approval, or a change, or additions,
I
or...
think we're really sandbagging on that first one.
Yeah, well, it's the second part that's really the hard
A
part.
smooth transition.
The smooth transition part.
Yeah, but think about the criteria for smooth.
You
Has
said the
everyone had the
criteria.
opportunity to review these proposed goals?
Yeah.
Any additions, we can still be submitted before next week. And,
The only other one, and it's in response to the letter from the township today,
Oh, yeah,
is that something that we would want to consider as far as the joint
that's a good idea.
committee, the relationship as far
I
as
think it's a good,
with,
yeah. I think it's a good.
that we're looking to possibly share services since the olive branch was extended. Rush, you even said that in the past that maybe it hadn't been as smooth of a relationship as it could have been, that it's...
I just had a conversation with him on election day, trust me. It
okay.
wasn't real smooth.
Yeah, okay, well, that may be something to consider.
All the more reason.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
all right, I'll make something up for that. Any other thoughts? No.
I just wanted to let everyone know that we are going to have an audit committee meeting, 5:30 before Tuesday's board meeting. So the public is invited, and of course the school board members are invited.
Is that a
And
goal?
anyone else. Pardon
Is
me?
that a goal?
No, it's just a meeting.
No, I thought you said anything else. You said anything else. So I thought you were going to adjourn.
No, I was talking about district goals. Or the
Oh,
school board
no.
goals.
I thought you said anything else.
All right.
I thought we were finished.
Then, we've all heard about the speeches order. A few weeks ago, y'all authorized me to, by acclamation, to respond to Mr. Bingham's letter about the LERTA process. And I've learned some more, so I never sent that letter. I never responded to that letter. He wanted a response by the 7th of November. But whereas I had briefed you all that we would review it again in a subsequent meeting, this is intended to be more or less a, if you are improving or building a new building, it's going to be approved. In other words, it's almost automatic as long as they fit the criteria. And I did not want to respond without you all knowing that. Now, what I intend to request of them in return for our participation is that we are given copies of those approved for the program, how much the current taxes are on that building and how much, or on that facility, and how much, well, we won't be able to know what the ultimate assessment will be, but the assessment of the building, so that we know what's going on, and then somewhere we will have a file of these projects that are approved. Now, Ms. Pisa asked for evidence on how often this is done. This is done at the municipal level, i.e. the city or the township. As such, there are no, it's not combined anywhere. Now, if you go online, you can read the city of Bethlehem or Allentown has a program, and they have had it for the last 10 years. They were looking at an increase in property tax of some, it was $4.5 to $5 million that year, because the period had expired where the taxes were abated. And they aren't excused, it climbs incrementally. But they had approved something like $14 million in abatements, and it was starting to give them the return now, where these improvements had increased the assessment of buildings, and they were starting to get the money returned. But there is no consolidated report that says within the state of Pennsylvania or any other state, this is how much often this is used, because it is done at the township, at the local level. So I could not provide you with that over, if you look, you can find a lot of city reports or township reports, because Lancaster's been using it, Lehigh County's been using it, and out to the east, they have been using this for years. But Berks County is just getting onto the program.
I could comment that nationally, of the 2,500 and odd number of super Walmart centers, over 2,000 of them have been partially financed this way. It's corporate merriment.
I could read that skinny little writing on the pink sections on that map, but I was just, my understanding was that those were potential areas of opinion now, and drug dealers all over the place.
Blighted?
Blighted, thank you. And I was just amazed at how much land that covers throughout the township. Or maybe I'm misreading that.
No, you're not misreading it, but it is a difference in legal interpretation. To us, blighted means blighted.
Yeah.
City.
If you remember Exeter Commons when it was vacant land was
Like the Providade in another 5 years will be blighted. But blighted under the law's definition, yes, it can be run down, or it can be that the property is not fulfilling its potential financial return in the form of it's underdeveloped, or is not, the shopping center, the promenade is not returning the same fiscal returns as it did when the stores were full. So that is now considered a blighted area, no matter what it would look like. if it was shining brand new. The fact is, it is not performing to the ultimate, so that is how it is. Now, the thing about that, this is for commercial, not residential. And you'll see a lot of those areas, Wrighton, just about all the residential areas are included in that. But those zones were established by the commissioners at the courthouse. Local zoning still takes priority. So if you are living in a residential area, you can't, unless you can get it passed by the planning commission, you cannot do anything commercial, therefore you will not be able to take advantage of alert. So it's
So the alert just applies to commercial?
commercial, non-residential, non-residential. So, is there anything else to come before the board?
Just if I could remind everyone that tomorrow afternoon is the District Community Health Fair at Brighton from 4 to 7. There was a very nice article, which there's a copy of in your packet, about Susie Blankenbiller and having organized it for 15 years. And this is her swan song before retiring. So if you have a chance, come out to the health fair.
I represented the doctor's office at the first one, and I gave out Frisbees.
Did you?
Yes, it was down the rain. That was many years ago. If there's nothing else, thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Fall play and first district home playoff game Friday, big weekend, so look forward to seeing everybody up to this high school.
Thursday, Saturday.
Thursday and Saturday. for fall play.
Thank you very much. Have a good night, Gene.